Hey everyone, Alicia Esposito of Demand Gen Report here, and I'm really excited today because I have a very special guest, Andy Enninger of Second City. Andy, thanks so much for taking the time.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Alicia.
So for those of you who don't know, Andy's going to be speaking at a B2B Marketing Exchange, which is going to be happening in February in Scottsdale. So today, I think we're going to give you guys a little sneak peek of some of the topics and trends that Andy's going to be talking about at the show. And of course, some overall trends and best practices that we're seeing in the B2B marketing landscape. So I think to kick things off, Andy, for those who don't know, of course, Second City is a well-known name. It's helped foster some of the biggest names in the entertainment industry and comedy and so on. But I guess for those watching, let's set the stage a little bit. What do you do at Second City? And more importantly, how do you help B2B brands?
Cool. Well, Second City's been around for almost 60 years. We look great for being that old. And our big thing that we do is sketch comedy. We create sketch comedy for the stage, but we use improvisation. So everyone that performs for us is a writer and a performer, and they really gain their 10,000 hours of mastery in terms of listening to the audience. Everything is audience calibrated. Everything is tried and tested through improvisation. And then the best of those become the scenes that make up our sketch shows. So somebody like a Tina Fey or if Stephen Colbert or even Steve Carell, who performed at Second City when they were starting off, they learned to apply their craft in this way. And Second City Works, which is the arm of Second City that works with corporations, is able to use that same engine to generate content or discover insights on being able to connect with consumers, with other companies, with their clients.
No, it's great. And it's so extremely fascinating how something in entertainment can be applied to corporations and big businesses. So I think we should just dive in. I mean, the fact is that all brands are basically doing content marketing today, right? I mean, you can't go anywhere without hearing about the term and, learning something new about a new trend or a tactic. But I guess to kick off our conversation, I want to hear from you. What separates the content marketing greats from the jesters? What are the leaders really doing right now?
A couple of years ago, we did some work with teenagers, and we were really trying to find out how they could be reached, like what was authentic for them, what felt like, oh, it carried the brand kind of naturally, wasn't trying too hard, but still entertained them. And we were looking particularly for comedy. A lot of our clients come to us when they want to use comedy as the tone, but really want to be able to carry the brand along that. And it was fascinating in how the teens approached it and how they gave us kind of the rubric for measurement for what's successful. And we've really seen this play out, not only in terms of that authenticity, but just that ability to have that sense of randomness, the unexpected. And I think that is a quality that now we start to see it everywhere, something unexpected. And I love that that sense of the fifth taste, that umami, that umami, that kind of extra dimension that it has to it. And for Second City, how we get at that is a lot of trial and error. And in fact, working with teens, we even noticed that they couldn't even tell you what was going to work. They had to see a lot. They knew it when they saw it. And I think that the greats are really finding a way to quickly test a lot of different ideas, find the one that resonates. And it's not always the one that they expect. All the strategy in the world behind the scenes and even the audience understanding doesn't get you to that extra third special dimension. That fifth dimension, it's a dimension beyond the perceptible ones.
No, it's great. And you hit on some interesting points here. So you hit on the ability to kind of test and figure out what works and what doesn't, presenting the unexpected, of course, using humor in a way to tell your story. But what do you think are the most significant missed opportunities, or the most significant missed opportunity? Do you find that B2B brands, for the most part, are a bit hesitant to tap into that humor and try to connect with people in a more person-to-person way?
I don't think humor is always right for everything, as much as I love it. And I wish the world was a little more humorous. There certainly is kind of a style and tone. And I think that humor carries with it some risk. There's certainly opportunities there too. What is missing, I think, is discovering beyond the brand voice, like what is that connection voice? And it really is to understanding more intimately what the consumer is going to accept from that brand. I think back to, this is sort of a weird comparison, but it'll make sense in a moment. I worked a bit in Japan through Second City, working with comedians there, and one of their styles of comedy is manzai comedy. It's kind of like comedy duos, think like a Laurel and Hardy, and actually it kind of proceeds the same way. It's sort of there's typically a goof and there's typically a smarter person, and then they kind of play off each other in terms of status. And we worked with people who were just starting off in their career. And you can have all the book learning in the world and all the technical skills, but you don't know what the connection is going to be between those two comedians until they start working together. And I think for brands, you're not going to know what's going to be acceptable to your client until you start putting some things out there and finding opportunities to lower the stakes in doing that. Is it possible to bring some of your clients into the room and talk through some of these pieces and see what resonates, see where their eyes light up? Can you lower the stakes and try out a lot of things until you start to discover that territory? I think we end up with a lot of high stakes by trying something out and it fails and it feels like a miss. At Second City, those misses are such a huge piece of, now we know the guardrails, we know what doesn't work. We know that in this controversial topic, we can't use this way of approaching the audience because we lose them. And that's as important for us as the thing that does work. And I think that I see companies be so fear-based and hesitant to discover those guardrails. And they haven't gained the skills to kind of articulate those guardrails kind of across the organization too. So even once they have a hit, it's hard to replicate that. Like, what about that worked? Maybe discovering that. And sometimes you have a hit and then a few misses and that's what's going to tell you why the hit hit.
Oh, that's great. So beyond finding that connecting point, like what truly resonates with your target buyer or your target audience, I mean, what do you think are the basic principles of great storytelling today? Since you cover, the improv and, comedy and storytelling, what do you think those elements are for a B2B organization or brand, as they're trying to create their content or find better ways to engage with their customers?
I think I've been doing some work in directly with salespeople lately, and one of the things we look at in terms of storytelling is, can you, rather than have to lay out the story and be the person that's just the teller, how can you ask questions that allow the other person to fill in and start to discover the story for themselves? And I think the really engaging content marketing is ones where the other person on the other side is able to complete the story, or there's a piece that requires their engagement. There's a gap there. There's something missing. They have to fill in the blanks. And that looks different across different industries, but there's just something magical when they have to fill it in. I mean, for us on stage, we literally have the audience shout things out, and that might affect an element that's in a sketch, but that keeps the audience listening. And we know that we calibrate when and where that's going to happen through the show so that we can tell, ooh, now you bring your stuff in. But I think it's that opportunity to not deliver the whole thing as a packaged piece, but give them a piece, and so that the audience can actually build on it. I love the phrase that we often use backstage at Second City, which is bring a brick, not a cathedral. Like, how do you find that brick that people can find to start to build upon, and they feel like they're an active piece in that?
No, it's great. And, I don't know much about improv, but it's something that fascinates me. And, I know some basic principles. And one of the things that I know is that a common term is yes and, as a way to continue the conversation and keep things going. So how can, the salespeople, like you're talking about in your previous example, and also marketers kind of tap into that to, build momentum and spark that creativity? Because I feel like that's the way to do it, to be open and accepting and try to move forward versus, oh, I don't know what to do, and just kind of shut down.
For me, the two most important junctures are when you're just starting with ideas, that ability to create an abundance of ideas. That's yes and. Yes and is all about looking for possibility in any and every harebrained idea first, and then saving that opportunity to poke holes, which we know we have to do. You can't support financially every idea, but look for possibility first and then poke holes after you have a huge list. For us on stage, we might have 20 scenes in a 2-hour show, but we've gone through 100 scenes to get there. We leave so much on the cutting room floor. And I think that that's the biggest application of yes and at the beginning of a process. And I think that's one of the ways that we discover what's magic. We never would have approached this controversial topic in this way, but the audience told us that worked, and we tested it out. And I think that the other piece is when you put something out there, even if it is a fail, finding ways to listen for how the audience does react, what they need, what was missing for them, where they might build it, or even use the missing as another piece of marketing. Like the reaction to their negative reaction suddenly earns their trust and their interest.
Got it. So we're going to dive deeper into this whole risk-taking and testing and learning topic in a second, but I do want to take a quick pause because, throughout this presentation, we're going to be giving away free tickets to B2B Marketing Exchange. So I'm going to take a quick pause and announce our first winner. And just a quick note that if you are the winner and your name is called, number one, congratulations. Number two, you're going to be receiving an email with more details on how to redeem your free pass. So our first winner today is Jessica Grazer of Signal. So Jessica, congratulations. Again, you're going to be receiving a follow-up email with more details on your free ticket. So we'll see you in Scottsdale in February. To continue the conversation, Andy, we talk about that element of risk taking and the fact that, there's a fear of failure in B2B, I feel like, because, people are fighting for budget, they need to prove their worth and their success. There are a lot of, elements at play there that I think may prevent people from, taking a risk or going off the beaten path, so to speak. And that kind of leads to a stall in creativity and, messaging, sticking to corporate branding, sticking to that jargony speak that we hear so much about. So I want to hear from you. How can brands break free from that? How can they, use their customers or their buyers out there to find ways to communicate with them or to them in a different way that is more meaningful, it's more relevant, and it forges that connection that you were talking about earlier in our discussion?
One of my favorite aspects of storytelling is the examination of the hero, and not like as the Arnold Schwarzenegger who comes in and kicks some butt and makes things happen, but who you're following through a story. And I think one of the times that it's really useful to even consider the hero is when you have an idea internally and you're trying to sell that through the organization before it even goes out to your clients or customers, and to be able to talk about the experience of your clients or customers as the hero, as opposed to kind of, we tried this, then we studied this, then we learned this, then this is the research we got. We often talk about ideas from our own point of view, rather than really mastering that ability to talk about, this is how it might affect, or here's how we understand a day in the life, or here's an understanding of a need of our customers, and here's how this way of reaching them, it's a little innovative, it's a little out there, it might be surprising, but really starting to kind of sell internally using great storytelling, even before you create the content itself, even with the idea of it, whether that's a different interesting channel that you're going to reach them with, or encouraging and kind of galvanizing everyone else and getting those people who do hold the purse strings to see it in a different way. I think that's a huge piece of diplomacy and storytelling that happens behind the scenes before you can even tell the story of to the end client.
No, that's great. So would you say that's an important step for, starting to embrace these principles or, make this shift? Because I feel like, say there's a really big brand with a lot of heritage, a lot of red tape and, a lot of different roles and people that you have to deal with. I mean, making a change like this or making such a shift in your approach can seem a little bit daunting or a big undertaking. So what would you recommend to these marketers that want to start to embrace these principles and make a change, but don't quite know where to start?
I think it is in terms of starting small behind the scenes. Also, I mean, realizing and being able to tell the story internally, your competitors are starting to do this. They're going to get creative. They're looking at other resources. I mean, Second City is getting a lot of calls to help people like come up with content itself. People are starting to say, what we've been doing is not working. It's not standing out. It's so cluttered now. People have so many options. Either we always feel like we fail on the side of being too brand centric or too content, and the brand isn't carried along, and we really struggle to find the sweet spot between. I think it's a matter of starting to build space for risk and trial and error behind the scenes safely. And what does that look like? It might be creating like a quick half-day sequence where you actually bring some of your clients into the room and try a bunch of ideas with them and have them help to tell you, here's what we'd accept from you. This part doesn't feel authentic. They can either react to ideas, they can give you ideas, they can collaborate with you, but you can discover the tone and the style of content and what they're not getting now. Maybe even find some white space where no one else is reaching them or reaching out to them or providing something of utility or use. And that's where it's going to be really innovative. But I think that innovation with how you proceed behind the scenes, even before you get to the material itself, trying more ideas more quickly, letting ideas be horrible, mediocre, and out of that also finding the gold. We really do believe that with that sense of yes and, with looking for possibility, even an idea that feels, oh, this isn't possible on the surface, through the addition of other lenses and perspectives, suddenly that might start to grow and really flourish. Whereas if you don't have that ability and it's an organization that shuts things down because of fear, the best idea in the world is going to die on the vine. And that person's going to leave and go to a nice startup.
So would you say like the startup type companies are more willing and eager to embrace these principles? Or what are you guys seeing in terms of your work with different types of B2B brands?
I think that there's a certain sense of entrepreneurialism that is hungry for storytelling in particular. We see a lot of people like looking at things like the hero's journey or breaking down how Pixar crafts a film, like really being hungry to use those and to empower and embolden themselves on how can they create great story in the content they're creating, but how can they tell the story and sell that story behind the scenes.
Got it. So let's say, hypothetical scenario, a company goes through this process, the yes and process. They start to generate an idea. What would be the process, or how would you recommend a brand, kind of activate this idea and not only turn it into a piece of content, but say, an actual, like a full-on campaign? I mean, what would that rollout process look like, or how can you ensure that that initial idea or that initial story is conveyed successfully from that one piece of content to something that spans, several weeks or several months?
I think that we've seen some companies have great success in working in parallel with small teams. So they take either where it's coming up with the idea in general. Small teams have worked on several parallel ideas, and then they're able to look to see kind of across those which is golden. And then once they find that idea, even taking the seed of that idea and letting themselves work in parallel teams, not in competition, but just let's explore this and see where we might be able to take it so that they can start pressure testing it. As much as Second City loves a good yes and, we also love a good no but. We're pretty rigorous and ruthless when it comes time to edit, because we know we have to get that scene that's so funny at 12 minutes down to 6 minutes, and it's painful. But there's a lot of cutting stuff out. And that's when you start to bring in that brain that's able to pressure test, see what works. And we think that working in parallel becomes a really fantastic way. One smaller team might come up with a few of the caveats and hurdles. Another team might think of it from a totally different standpoint. And those hurdles are great because the reality of how it's going to roll out, how it's going to look, the format, where it's going to live, that determines how the content's going to look, and they might discover different opportunities within that. So rather than kind of having a single team use groupthink an idea to death, because there's a lot of reasons why stuff won't work with smaller groups, smaller teams working in parallel, coming back in for a touch point and sharing. I think that's tactically, when we've gone in and helped people to kind of create a more streamlined process for getting ideas into activation, that's been a thing that's been really helpful.
And it makes sense too, because everyone has different brainstorming styles or ways to kind of work through information. Like I know I myself, there are times where I kind of freeze in really big group discussions. Like I need time to kind of process all the information and brainstorm on my own. So in a way, it meets it in the middle and kind of addresses all those different styles and preferences.
Two of our favorite, like, you're sitting at your desk, you're trying to finesse an idea. Two of the favorite things that we love. One is just simple mind mapping or clustering, just kind of going haywire with bubbles of ideas branching out in a tangential mode where everything and anything can go. And then at the exact opposite end, and we often use this when we're kind of a leader trying to narrow things down, getting to what's the hashtag? What's 10 hashtags?
Right.
Not like that hashtag would ever live online someplace, but if you had to tell the story or the key message of this in a hashtag, what is it? And that more than anything, because we've started to think in that diminished terms in terms of like, what's the espresso nugget of it, that helps people kind of clear away the clutter or just focus on what's really most preeminent, what's working.
Mm-hmm. No, and I think we hit on so many tips and best practices from, instilling change and making a start, in this whole process to how folks brainstorm and collaborate and share ideas. So I think we've covered great ground in only 20 minutes. But are there any other tips or best practices that you want to share for all the folks watching who are inspired and want to get started? Or do you want to provide any insight on what else you're going to be covering during your session at a B2B Marketing Exchange?
I'll give two things, a little bit of a foretaste. We'll definitely be looking at hero and transformation. One of the things that we think gets lost, like for example, if you hear your uncle tell a horrible story over Thanksgiving, that's still top of mind for me. Not that my uncle's told, I was the uncle telling the bad stories. No, my stories are great. But the thing is often missing when you hear a story and you're like, why are they telling this story, is that sense of transformation. Human beings listen to story for transformation. We go to look for content because it provides a transformation, either an understanding of something for our life. It gives us a nugget for our own makeover. We're looking for transformation. We're constantly looking for a before and after state. Great stories have that before and after. Dorothy is in Kansas and doesn't like it. She goes to Oz, she comes back. Kansas is cool now. In every story, every movie, every great story, every great story we share over a beer with friends, there's a transformation of some type. And I think that's sometimes the thing that's lost, that what's in it for them. And I think that when something feels too much brand oriented, it's too much tell. And it's too much, here's the brand, it's not enough. Here's a transformation that's available for you. It's an interesting lens to look at content through. You can see where the stuff that works has built into it and baked into it some level of transformation, and where it doesn't seem to work, something you're like, what's the deal? What's the point?
That's great, Andy. So again, I think we covered so much great ground and you shared so many great insights. I'm so excited for your session at B2B MX. But I think to close off our chat today, I'm going to have you put your improv cap on for a second.
All right.
I want you to finish the sentence. 2 content marketers walk into a bar.
And they immediately start blogging. And the bartender says, I'm sorry, we don't serve content marketers here. It's an unbranded bar. And they ordered a branded Alexander.
Nice.
All right.
There you have it, folks. You saw improv firsthand. Andy, thanks again so much for taking the time. And
my pleasure.
For all the folks still hanging in there to see if they won their ticket to B2B MX, our final winner for their free ticket is Samantha Demers of Covio. Either way, Samantha, you're going to be getting an email with details to redeem your free ticket. Congratulations. And for everyone else watching, if you want to learn more about the B2B Marketing Exchange, please visit our website and please be on the lookout for more details about new speakers and new sessions. We're going to be having 4 different tracks this year: content strategy, demand generation, sales enablement, and account-based marketing. No shortage of content this year. So you'll get to see Andy again too, which makes the trip to Scottsdale even more worthwhile. Thanks again, everyone, for taking the time out to join us today. Have a good one.